Hey everybody, good evening. Welcome to an author talk. We're going to have Ivo and Matt joining us, and we're going to be talking about Pisces Witch. I see Matt, so I'm going to see if I can invite both of you. Oh my gosh, you guys are so prompt. This is like why we're doing this when Mercury is in the microwave, because shouldn't we know better? Hold on, I'm going to accept you. Hi. Hello.
Hello.
Oh my
Hey, can you
goodness.
hear me?
I can hear both of you, and we're just going to go with the fact that this is working. This is very exciting. I was like, maybe we should have taken this into consideration when we're trying to do a triple in the middle of this crazy
Right.
retrograde. Because Instagram is always fussy as it is. Anyway, hi. Whoop. I promise I'm not chaotic. I'm lying to you. I am. I'm Gina. I'm co-owner of Amityville Apothecary. How are both of you doing tonight? Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm well.
Awesome.
Thank you for having us.
So excited to be having you. So we've been working through all of the witches for this past couple of months now.
Hmm.
So it's really interesting how now here we are at Pisces. We're approaching the Pisces full moon in a couple of days, which I think it's going to pack a punch. So everybody's been saying. But I just want to say how delightful this series is. I had mentioned it in our stories, how I feel like it makes me a better practitioner, even in reading signs that have nothing to do with me,
Yeah.
because it allows me to gain insight into, especially having a store, the different types of witches as they come in. I'm like, oh, okay, Pisces, admittedly, no offense, Matt, Pisces is my weakest sign in terms of how much I know. You got
What
nervous. You
sign are
thought I was
you?
gonna, you thought I was gonna say something bad about Pisces. I wasn't going there. I I am a Libra sun. I am a Capricorn rising and a Leo moon, if you can't tell by the moon.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from this whole series myself. I learned something from everything Evo writes.
Yeah.
Like, I could gush about Evo forever, and I fought to be able to co-write this specific book. So,
Ivo, I was reading your bio on your
Yep.
website, and there's no way you've been teaching as long as you've been
I'm
teaching,
a,
looking as amazing as you look. Like,
my birthday is December 9th, 1958.
unbelievable.
I've been with my partner for 45 years.
So you are a lesson in all of the things. Looking amazing. I mean, I don't know if like a glamour magic book is in your future, but geez, like this, you're
There's
looking.
there's a little bit of glamour stuff going on. But honestly, I think that the biggest thing is uh, if you are a witch, you have choices.
Yes.
And one of the choices is to actively engage with your life force. And, I've had health issues. I have a congenital heart thing that I had from the day I was born, and a couple other things. But I assume that I have the power to draw in more life force. And if I can do healing work on other people, which I've done, I can certainly not do the same thing for myself, but I can plug in and tell my body, heal, soak it all up, keep it going.
I
I
And
love that.
jokingly refer to Evo as Wolverine because he
this
heals
is true.
so
This
fast.
is true. This
Like
is true.
literally, like people will forget he even went through something just
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah.
he's like regenerated already.
Yeah, yeah, a couple years ago, I had a tree fall on my leg, and
Oh,
I live in the middle of the woods, and I was cutting down a tree, but I was not hit by the one I was bringing down. I did everything right, but there was a tree that was dead and standing further off in the forest, and shook up the earth enough for it to decide to fall on
oh
me.
no.
So anyway, so I had to have knee replacement on my left knee, and nowadays. there's like this thin little line where the scar is supposed to be. And I think in about another year, I'll have the big zipper gone on the chest, and it'll be just this fine little gray line. But I actually tell my body, I'm glad you're doing the good work, and I plug into, honestly, I'm going to say I'm going to plug into my sun sign, and that, because that is where part of our core energy comes from. I've seen a lot of folks that are magical people, like both my teachers looked, well, one of them's still alive, and she's 95 this year, but
Amazing.
I would say she looks this like she's in her, most people guess that she's in her 70s.
Mm.
So I think it's a question of, if you manage your energy well, you live well. Now, there are also people that manage their energy in a way that maybe it's the thing that they need to do this life, but it burns them out fast, like a candle at both ends in the middle.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting that you said about drawing on your sun sign to increase your life force,
Mhm.
obviously, and for all of you guys joining us and watching, we're talking about Pisces Witch, but this is a series of 12 books.
Yep.
Matt fought, and we're going to get to your story about how you fought and won the battle of the Pisces Witch. So I'm interested in hearing that. Um, but in the beginning of this book, you talk about, drawing on the energy of Pisces, using, ritual to charge your tools with the energy of Pisces. And I thought that was such an interesting perspective, because I sort of feel that sometimes, like, oh, your sun sign, like it's sort of like seen as like a little bit pedestrian by
Mhm.
by people, like not taken as seriously as like the totality of your natal chart. So I'd love to hear more about that and how people could begin to bring that practice into their craft.
Are we flipping a coin, Matt?
Yeah, I
I mean, you could go one.
We
We
go
could start
back.
with Ivo, and then
All right,
Matt can go. And
sure.
I would love to hear both your perspectives for sure.
How about
I mean,
this?
all I would be doing is just parroting things that I learned
No,
from Evo. So,
stop. All right, so
um,
go ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna say one of the things I really liked, and I don't remember if it was in the book or something I heard you say before, but the idea of the sun sign being like the light that
Hmm.
comes in when you're born. So it's
Yep.
sort of like your essence, in a sense. I'm
Hmm.
probably butchering it, but
No, you've got the core part of it, which is when your spirit comes down into this world and takes up residence in a body, it descended on its own ray, and it's whether you want to consider that your higher self, your divine self. There's lots of different language for it, but ultimately it's your sun self. It's the light of growth, love, light, and order, because the sun represents order, right?
Mm.
So, it, of course, if you want to understand a person's personality and their life journey, you look at the whole chart. But if you ask me, where is their life coming from? It's their sun sign. And to the degree that a person lives their sun sign by sign, and also which house it's in, if you know that, it's not absolutely essential, then if you live in accordance to that, then more life is given. You're not getting in the way of yourself, so more life is given, more light is given. Now, it lights up now your moon and your Mars and your Mercury and your Venus are all in different places, but just like the sun in the solar system lights up those other planets by reflection, you see a bit of your sun sign reflected in all the other planets in the chart. Because the chart's about synthesis, you pull it all together, but yeah, your sun is your divine spark. Now, that's enough to get started.
I love that. I love that, leaning into your your divine spark. I wrote down that your sun represents order because, of course, my Cap rising was appreciating that very much.
Yeah, yeah. Keeps the planets turning around the center and keeps everything in balance. And if you have any folks in the audience that are into Kabbalah, Tree of Life, that sort of thing, well, it's the sun in your chart is your inner Tiferet.
Mm.
It's the middle of the tree.
Yeah,
Pulls it all
perfect.
together.
So, Matt, tell me about fighting to be the Pisces of
okay.
Pisces Witch.
So to give it context, when I wrote my second book, Mastering Magic, there was a lot of difficulties in that process, and I had to keep asking for extensions. Like I got COVID, life just happened, so I think I kind of traumatized my editor in asking for constant extensions.
Okay.
So when Pisces Witch, when the Zodiac series was announced, um, I messaged my editor and I was like, who's doing Pisces Witch? Because I hadn't been asked. And I'm like, I need to do Pisces Witch. And she was worried because I still hadn't finished my manuscript for The Psychic Art of Tarot.
Mm-hmm.
So she was really reluctant to like give me, and I was like, you don't understand, like Pisces Witch, Psychic Witch, not that different. And like, I need to write a book with Ivo Dominguez Jr. because I always, like almost any interview you hear me talk in, like I gush about Ivo and I say, Ivo's who I want to be when I grow up, kind of a thing. So she's like, okay, well, let me see. So she went and she asked Ivo, and Ivo's like, yeah, sure. So I was like, yes. And I did it. And what was great about it was, um, it got me back into enjoying writing again. Like I had so
Mhm.
much fun with this, almost too much fun. Like if you notice, like I use a lot of puns throughout
Yes.
this book.
Mhm.
And like to like a dad joke level, but it made me fall in love with writing again, which was fantastic for writing my other book, The Psychic Art of
Mm-hmm.
Tarot, because it didn't feel like a chore. Because sometimes writing does feel like a chore. I mean, it is a job, especially when you have
Yeah.
deadlines and things have to be forced. You got to force those muses, and those muses don't listen to anyone. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That is true. I have to say, in your sections, and for those of you that haven't yet picked up Pisces Witch, I do think that everybody should have every single one in the series. Obviously, it's easy for me to say because I have easy access to all of the books.
Right.
Um, but they're beautifully written, but specifically your sections in Pisces, which made me have FOMO that I'm not a Pisces. And I didn't get it like from the others in the series. Like I was like, oh yeah, this is really interesting about being, a Cancer, being, I don't know, like a Virgo, what have you. But this,
Mhm.
I'm like, I am pissed
Yeah.
that I'm not a Pisces.
well, why? Why do you feel that way?
Just because, you know, I just like the access to emotionality, the access to water, which I guess like living on Long Island and living on the South Shore and being around water my whole life. And just I'm like, you know what? Like this is great. Like I really connected with so much that you have to say. But when I say no, very little about Pisces. Cancer is the other one. Like those two, there's just not a lot of those two signs in my life for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Um, but I really, really did enjoy it. And it was very light and very, like dad jokes. I really enjoyed it. It was very easy to read, very easy to understand, but also again, like I felt a little jealousy. Not about like the boundary setting and not about taking on other people's energies. That I feel like is a little bit difficult.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
there's a lot of downsides to being a Pisces too. So, but being a Pisces, I'm not going to glamorize those things. I'm going to
yeah,
glamorize my vision of Pisces. Because it does have downsides like boundaries. I've always
yeah.
had issues with boundaries, and that's a reoccurring lesson. But I think I'm getting a little better at it. And like addictive personality is a big
Hmm.
thing for Pisces, and that doesn't always mean substances, but just
Right.
the like sort of fixation on something and not letting it go. um, we are imaginative and very psychic, but that also lends to delusion sometimes and getting a
Yeah.
little bit out of touch with reality. So luckily I have a Capricorn moon, which I
Mhm.
call like my sort of like safety device in my chart, because it's
Yeah.
the only earth I have.
Mhm.
Wow.
Like my chart is pretty much all water and fire with like one placement in air, and then, well, no, I don't think I have any air. I think air is like my outer planets. But yeah, um, Capricorn moon is the
Interesting.
thing that grounds me, or else I just would be all over the place.
Up in the ether. Um, Somebody had a question asking
Oh
Ivo's
yeah,
thoughts on sidereal versus tropical. I mean, I'd love to hear that too.
easy breezy. They all work. So, but let me explain what I mean by that. There are a lot of different systems of astrology, and they all work because within themselves, they are a coherent way of describing the wholeness of the universe. So far, so good? In the same way that different magical traditions have different ways of describing the universe. There's different cosmologies. So if you go to somebody for a reading or guidance about what's going to be happening next or what are problems that are recurring in your life, then if so long as they are well versed in the system that they are using, then it will work. Now, my personal preference is tropical because uh, the the way I see it is we are looking at the world out from the earth with these eyes at this time. And my first teacher of astrology taught me the signs this way. They have nothing to do with those scattering of stars in the distance that the ancients looked at because they needed something to map what part of the year they were in. The signs are a 30-degree chunk around the orbit of the Earth going around the sun. So the very first night, Ellen Reardon, my first teacher of astrology, lit a candle in the middle of her living room, and she was very bohemian and very insane and wonderfully intelligent. And she then proceeded to do 12 dances, one representing the energy of each of the signs. And she says that's all it is. It's a dance around the sun, and at each of those segments, the dance is different steps and looks different. It's a different style of being. So for me, the tropical works because that was my first exposure. And I'm going to say that for many things, it's the thing you fall in love with that you're more likely to do well at. I respect all the other systems, the Vedic astrology, the sidereal. There's a bunch of new systems coming out. And as long as it is coherent and well thought through, it works.
I love that
See, I don't
answer.
agree with sidereal because it says I'm an Aries, and I just refuse to believe
Well,
that.
but the way that they describe Aries isn't exactly the same way that the tropical astrologers do, and then they also modify things in a bunch of other ways so that it comes out a different way. It's kind
Mm,
of like uh, I've had several discussions this year with people talking about the holidays that many witches and pagans use,
right.
and we were
Hmm.
talking about Samhain and Beltane. And if you're in the northern hemisphere, Beltane happens when Taurus is at the 15th degree, right?
Hmm.
And well, that's the very same moment that on the other side of the world, we're having the time of the year that it would be Samhain
Mm,
because the seasons are flipped. And and if you think about it, I sex and death, Taurus and
yeah.
Scorpio. One
Hmm.
is so that if you see Taurus if Taurus is the sun sign when you're hitting the part of the year that the world is dying around you because you're in the southern hemisphere, man, that's going back into the earth. That's very very much about examining the limits of matter and what's there. If you do Scorpio during Beltane, I can totally see how that works as well. So my point is that all these things are coherently connected and thematically connected to each other. So as long as you stick within the understanding of the system, it works. Now, I will say I talk too much, so I will have to be told to shut up a couple of times. And my excuse is I don't have any air in my chart. And the way it works, if you don't have an element in your chart at all, like I have zero, no planets in air. If you have none, then either you're going to be a person of few words because you don't have the air thing, or because the universe hates a vacuum and there's no internal filter or limit, you just get this huge, ridiculous abundance of air. So that it can go either way. And as a witch, I choose to summon air.
I like it. I mean, you know, everybody's saying, no, it's not too much. It's great. And I agree. So interesting. And a bunch of sort of like flashes and light bulbs just went on in my brain about, Samhain and Beltane like existing at the same time.
Yeah,
And it, it, I guess, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a Libra. The duality of thing is something that really lights me up.
right.
Like the holding the opposites at the same time is something
Yep.
that like I always am consistently drawn to. So that like stroked that part of my brain that I was very happy to
Awesome.
hear.
See, this is why I love Ivo, though. Anytime he speaks, anytime he writes, like there's all these light bulbs kind of going off in epiphanies, and
Yeah.
it's very inspiring.
It,
I had good teachers.
it's it's amazing to be able to have a conversation, with both of you that are so immersed in the work and the practices because, you know, fortunately for me or unfortunately for me, again, Libra, a little bit of both, running a shop, a lot of times you're like so much in the business of
Yep.
it that which drew you into it in the beginning sort of gets pushed into the corners a little bit. Um, Danielle is actually asking us, my business partner, if each of you could talk about your earliest beginning in your metaphysical journey and how each of you started or got inspired.
Okay, I guess I'll start.
Yay.
Yeah.
Um, so my story, a lot of my origin story, I open my second book, Mastering Magic, with, because it's about how I discovered magic and how I realized that like this is real and that this can have huge life-changing effects. Um, Essentially, in a nutshell, like I was a foster care kid, and then my grandparents got custody of me, and they raised me super religious. We were Assembly of God, which is like Pentecostal and evangelical, like mixed, so like two very extreme forms of Christianity. And my grandfather was abusive, to not coddle it, like both verbally and physically. And the school teacher called saying that I was talking one day, and it was a Friday. So when I got home, he put me on extreme restriction, which what that means is I had to be in my bed, in my bedroom, with the electricity off, and I had to sit there doing nothing until he said I could use the restroom or eat or whatever. And so this happened for the whole weekend. And then it led into like I think Monday and Tuesday. I know he called me out at least one day. And my childhood brain may be exaggerating it to 2 more days, but time also was kind of fluid in this sort of state. So I'm like a 7, 8 year old child, right? So I'm like I have all this energy, all this uh, just vitality with nothing to do because I'm like in the bed. But that's when I started noticing things like, hey, I can get like this little resistance in my hand when I concentrate, and I started asking questions like, well, what's it like to go from like this waking state to the dreaming state? Like, what's that transition, because dreaming was like my escape at the time. So essentially like it kind of sparked something in me to realize that there's something else out there other than what I had been raised with. And then I somehow saw the movie The Craft, and that was like a religious experience. And it's so cliche for anyone in the 90s because there's that whole like, oh, you watch The Craft and you think you're a witch. But I totally watched The Craft and I was like, I need to be a witch, because I had never seen witches portrayed as something as empowering as those teenage girls were in that
Right.
movie. So this put me on like a quest to seek out anything I could on witchcraft and magic. So I assembled I call them my little coven, but I corralled a couple kids in school to yeah, let's be witches. So we started checking out everything we could in the library, our school library, on witches, which didn't really yield results other than like Roald Dahl the witches, right? But there
Right.
was one time book, like Time Life special books, and they had one. It was a black cover, and it was on witchcraft and magic, or witchcraft and sorcery, something like that. And most of it was like fictional witches and like historical witches and folklore. But then at the very end, it has a small section on like modern day witches and witchcraft. And so it had like what you expect, like it had Aleister Crowley and it had Anton LaVey, but then it had a picture of Maxine Sanders, co-founder of the Alexandrian tradition, and she's on a hill with like her coven all in white, and they're doing magic. And the caption explained what it was, and it used the word Wicca. So at this time, we were just integrating the computer lab into
Ooh.
schools. So I started searching for Wicca on, GeoCities and Angel Fire and all that on Netscape Navigator. And eventually I was able to get my hands on Silver Ravenwolf and Scott Cunningham books at the mall, which was hard because at first they
Yeah.
wouldn't, because of the town I lived in and the time. They were treating it like it was like porn or alcohol or something. Like they wanted an
Yeah.
adult to buy Silver Ravenwolf
Oh
with
my
me.
goodness.
So I eventually, during one of my grandfather's really like physically abusive moments, I had the last straw, and there was a spell in Silver Ravenwolf's book called the Bullfrog Bully Spell to make a bully stop bullying you. And so I cast the spell, and I really, really meant it, right? And within just a couple of days, everything lined up to where my uncle, my father's brother in San Diego, was able to get custody of me, and I was able to leave and like start a whole new chapter of my life. And I do credit that spell. Like I do think that spell is what sparked, because everything just weirdly came into sync after that. And so that essentially
Wow.
just sort of led like a lifelong journey into being interested in anything of this nature, anything occult, esoteric, supernatural, paranormal, whatever. And it's just, that's my origin story.
I don't love that journey for
Yeah.
for young you, especially as a
Yeah.
mother of
Mm.
kids. Like I don't love that, but I do love where it's brought you.
Yeah. So, I mean, because it did change my life, and it gave me power in my most like powerless moment, right? Like, because I'm just a little kid.
Mhm.
I have no fucking power. Oh, excuse me. No
Yeah,
freaking power.
it's
And
okay.
but that's why I'm so passionate about teaching it too, because I want people to be able to change their lives and hopefully have that be a ripple effect into creating change in larger scales for the world.
I it seems so cliche to say, as we change ourselves and as we heal ourselves, so goes the world. But
But it's true.
no truer sentiment. And I feel like every single day I say, everybody just needs to get a little bit more emotionally regulated.
Social media doesn't help with that.
No,
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 it does not.
it does not.
Danielle said she loves your story. She loves your podcast with Rachel. We do listen to it in the shop, and we will be taking your class at Omega. It's our birthday. So
Mm.
Danielle and I, my business partner, we have the same birthday, day,
Oh, wow.
year. We're both born in New York. So
Oh,
she's
wow.
older. So she's a Sag rising, and
Oh,
I'm a
I'm a
Cancer
Sag rising.
rising. Yes. So we will be there. We're very excited to
Yay.
learn from you further. I've never been to Omega, although I went to New Paltz, and so did Danielle. So we have been around there so often. Ivo, it's your turn.
Yeah. I'm going to condense a lot.
Okay.
So I was one of those kids that always saw things, heard things, knew things, scared the crap out of my parents when I was a little kid because we were visiting my grandfather and grandmother, my paternal side. And I told my mom and dad, Granddad's going to die tonight, which is,
Oh no.
as one does. And they didn't believe me, and they said, don't say things like that, yada, yada. And I made a point of recording on cassette recorders some conversations with Granddad, and because I knew he was going to go. And then the next morning at breakfast, we're around the table, and Granddad's not at the table, and he had died of massive stroke that night in his sleep. Um, so that was one probably one of the more dramatic ones, but I had a lot of incidents which unfortunately made my family a little bit crazy because they were very conservative people, Cuban Catholic, but of the very conservative form. And I had one grandmom that said, "Yes, I see things too. I believe you. Don't tell people you'll get in trouble." And another grandmom who was basically, "You're going to go to hell."
Nice.
So so that was the background. And my father was a professor Good news is that that meant college towns, and college towns always had better bookstores.
Yes.
And also, I had a library card to the university library, which meant I could look up any book I wanted when I was a kid. So that I was reading all. I started reading when I was very young. I was reading before first grade, so um, I was ahead of the game in terms of that kind of stuff. But I went through a period of I'm going to explore every religion. I went to temples. I went to synagogues. I tried all the things, and nope, nope. I'm feeling the happiest when I'm walking in the middle of the woods by myself. And of course, in high school, having found a bunch of ceremonial magic books and some medieval stuff, I tried to form a coven, of course. And one of my friends, his parents were leftover hippies, so they allowed us to like paint the concrete floor of their basement with all manner of arcane sigils and circles and tentacles and do stuff.
Awesome.
That's
And
cool.
that was good. That was good. Though some things happened that probably shouldn't have happened to people our age. Flash forward a little bit. It's junior year in high school, and my parents insisted that I needed to do a physical thing, not just be a bookworm. So I'm not, and by the way, I was really fast runner back then, and they wanted me for the 100-yard dash. I'd broken the school record by accident in gym class. But I said, no, I don't want to do that. So I got permission to leave the high school campus, walk to the University of Delaware's campus, and take fencing because sword is archery, right? So I was changing in the locker room, and I actually really enjoyed fencing. And this guy who looked ancient to me because he was a grad student, right? Is changing, and out from underneath his t-shirt pops a little silver pentacle, and my eyes lock on it. And I'm looking at, so are you Gardnerian? Are you Alexandrian? Are you Georgian? Are you one of Gwen Thompson's people up from Connecticut? And his eyes are getting bigger. Like, can we take this out to the hallway? Because I'm a minor. We're talking about this, and by the way, this is the 70s when this conversation is happening, and things were not cool around this. So he said, "Hey, you are too young. Any coven that would take you is exactly the wrong people to be around." But he agreed to, which is great. He agreed to say, "Hey, give me a pile of self-addressed stamped envelopes, and we will." That was the currency in the olden days for zines, and it was so that I gave him a pile, and he said, "We'll make sure you get the announcements in the newsletter for our coven, the collection of covens, and when you turn 18, come visit us." So when I turned 18, I went to what was a picnic in a public park, which was actually the origin story for most of the pagan gatherings
Hmm.
and the gathering and conference scene that came later, because that's where it started. And I met a bunch of people. I started taking classes, and I'm going to leave it at that point because that was actually pivotal for the following thing. I could have ended up a ceremonialist, but I loved the witches and I loved being out in nature. So though I borrow heavily from the Western mysteries, my heart wasn't there. So that was probably the turning point for that.
I love that. Um, I love that you said self-addressed stamped envelope because it literally,
Oh yeah,
I talk all the time in our business about my love of mail because as I'm a Gen Xer, so
right.
probably in between you two. Um,
Yeah,
pen
essentially a boomer.
pals, and getting mail
Yeah,
and correspondence
yeah,
was so amazing.
big
And
deal.
so, receiving anything in the mail was like the best, like running to the mailbox and like seeing something with your name on it. Like to me, there was like nothing better than
Yeah.
like somebody cared enough to actually spend the time to write something
Uh,
and get it to
uh,
me that they had something to say that like was meant for me. So I love that. I could like picture you, like I actually could see
oh
younger
yes,
you opening
absolutely.
this mail with this like delightful sort, like I'm getting actually full body goosebumps. Like I think I accidentally just like got into your memory there with
Awesome.
that. But
No, it
it's
was. It was because
beautiful.
it was a lifeline to a
Yeah.
different part of the world.
Yeah. So beautiful. What did, hold on. I think I missed a comment. Love. love this. People just need right people to teach them. I absolutely. And I think mail and parcels are like presents every time it comes. Yes, it is.
Mhm.
Except now we get like a little bit desensitized to it because of Jeffrey Bezos. We get so much packages all the time because of Amazon. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's annoying, but also it's a marvel to be able to get something within 24 hours. But
Yeah,
it does sort of take away some of the magic a little bit, I think. But
it
and
does.
handwritten notes are wonderful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I also really connect with both of you. And we have a sticker that we sell that we give away in the shop that says real witches read books. And so for both of you, like the love of reading and the love of the library, like for me, the library was a lifeline. I didn't really have a
Hmm.
lot of friends, and I was the first grandchild for 12 years. I was all by
Oh,
myself.
wow.
So I really had to immerse myself in reading and being out in nature and making up things. Um, but I was thinking back to some of the things that maybe piqued my interest. And I was really obsessed with Tudor and Stuart England. That was actually
Hmm.
my undergraduate. One of my majors was history, Tudor Stuart England. I mean, what's not to love about the story between Elizabeth and Mary, Queen of Scots? That's like a for me like amazing. But I was obsessed with Elizabeth and John Dee and astrology. And then my aunt had like the Virgo astrology books that you would get every
Hmm.
year, like those books.
Right, right.
And I would read it and I would pretend like it was mine, even though I'm not a Virgo. Everybody in my family is. But I thought that was like, I thought you were wealthy if you had that book, by the way. I thought it was such an amazing luxury. Um, so if both of you could give me like a little bit of what was when you were going through and writing this
Hmm.
book, what came up about Pisces? I mean, Matt, you are Pisces, but like what came up for you that surprised you that you're like, oh, and the same, and I want to say like the same goes for you. Like when you were compiling Pisces, which like
Hmm.
what came up for you where you're like, oh, I actually learned something here. Because I know there has to be something when we're writing or we're teaching, we're always learning. So I'm curious to see like what your insight is to that.
Going through it real quick, I'm like, what did I? Because I feel like I wrote this like forever ago now.
What do you think? I I really liked what you said about um being your own ideal parent and sort of like reparenting yourself through traumas that really interested me. I think, and I think that's like a tool that anybody can use.
So not quite answering your question, but something my eyes keep going to is
Sure.
when I was writing it, I kept wearing this, which is a piece of Sybil Leek's dress that the Buckland Museum sent me.
Wow.
Um, and it's funny because I was just wearing it just to get that kind of Pisces witch energy in it, and she wasn't the original bio in this book, but at the last minute, she somehow found her way into being the bio in the book, and that made me really happy. And it felt very much like, I don't know, like yay! So Sybil did get into the book. Um, because Sybil is someone that I didn't find until later in my life. I only knew of her work because of Silver Ravenwolf's
Mm-hmm.
work, because Sybil was to Silver Ravenwolf what Silver Ravenwolf was to me as a child. And her books are like pretty hard to get because they're not in print anymore. And I've started like collecting them. But the more I read her books, the more I'm like, you were such a Pisces. And not only is she such a Pisces, she is such an entertaining writer. I find myself
Hmm.
laughing a lot when I'm reading her works. She's just such an entertaining person. And it kind of made sense to me because I'm like, okay, I kind of see where Silver got a lot of her very engaging personable like writing style. It's not the same, but it's very
Mm-hmm.
much like you can see there's an influence of what she grew up on.
I think that very much answered the question. Because
That's pretty
it's
good.
surprising.
Yeah.
I like when you're sort of thinking you're going to go in one direction, and it's like, I
Yeah.
love that. It's beautiful. And I love how she sort of like spoke to you or influenced in some way
Yeah.
with her piece of
So I
artwork.
work with a lot of ancestors of the craft,
Hmm.
and most of the ancestors of the craft I work with tend to also be like authors of the craft.
Mm-hmm.
So this was cool because, you know, usually I'm working a lot with like Scott Cunningham. That tends to be like the main. I just relate to him on, especially being like a gay man.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I really resonate with that. So this was really cool. Devin has a connection with her too because she was on To Tell the Truth, which is that old game of like, you know, she was the very first to be like where they had to guess who is the witch. And she was the witch and she was contestant number 3. And then a couple years ago, my husband Devin was on and they asked the same thing, like, who is the witch? And he was contestant number
Oh,
3.
cool.
So, you know, he was calling and connecting with Sybil because he's very much a medium himself. Um, so he's always had a strong connection with her on that level. And I've always had a connection with her on like an ancestral, like working
Yeah.
level. But like with this, it felt very much like Sybil made her way into the book, and it felt very much. It's just one of those things where you feel like spirit is behind the scenes
Yeah.
doing stuff.
I love that. And I love that little reminder. Because maybe some people that are watching and are just getting into the craft or just learning about working with their ancestors don't understand that you could work with ancestors in a way where they're not just, you
Yeah,
know, within like your family tree. That reminds me of a conversation, an author talk we had many months ago with Ben Stimson, who did a book
yeah,
on,
Yeah, Ben.
you know, ancestry work. He was amazing. And
Hmm.
he said the same thing. And that was like, actually, I was like, wow, how amazing. And it's so funny because when you're a creative person or you're a writer or you're a musician, you do sort of stand on the backs of your ancestors, but it's just such a different way of thinking about it from the magical perspective.
yeah. And I try to be very conscientious of remembering
Hmm.
who came before me,
Mm-hmm.
both directly, as in teachers and stuff of that nature, but also people who paved the way.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to be perfect. I'm not going to agree with everything they even have to say about magic, but I respect what they've done for this path. They have contributed something to the path. And if there is something worth honoring, I honor that part of them.
I love that.
Because like for example, like I love Aleister Crowley's mind when it comes to magic. I don't like Aleister Crowley as an individual.
Right. I think many of us feel very similar. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. And I think in 21st century, we've sort of lost the distinction of being able to separate different facets of people
yeah,
apart. Whereas it's very like baby with the bathwater situation.
yeah.
And
And
I
I,
think there's value.
I'm all for that if they're dead. If they're alive and they're spewing garbage about people or whatever, just
Mm,
horrible views, then I'm not going to support them. But if they've been dead for like since the Victorian, Edwardian times, like
right,
I can give them a little bit of grace while acknowledging that
Right.
yes, they did have problematic views, whether that was a factor of their culture, of their time, or
right,
just them as a shitty individual.
Hmm.
right.
But like, you know, Ivo said on one of the when we had him on our podcast, you know, he brought up the point that like people are complex and they're shitty in general in every area of life, you know.
Yeah.
And that it's true, like whether it applies to like the history of our country, history of invention, science, whatever,
Yeah,
like, you know, people can make great contributions and also be horrible people at the same time.
that is true and unfortunate,
Yeah.
but important to remember.
If, so I'm going to throw in something that's a Pisces related thing about that comment.
I love it.
So,
Okay.
all right. So most people can visualize the two fish swimming in different directions connected by a line, or the glyph, which is the two arcs with the line across.
Mhm.
Pisces is, and it's also the last sign of the zodiac. As you go through the cycle of the 12, it's the last one. Pisces is constantly trying to mend the break between the beginning and the end.
Mm.
That that makes that glyph makes so much more sense.
It,
It's kind of, you can think of it as like bastings, a basting stitch, just to hold things together. Because
yeah.
it's Pisces wants to unify everything, is usually the direction that people hit at strongly, but it really is about how do we make the circle back into a circle so that it doesn't end.
That
And as
makes so
we
much sense.
and as we move through this, and I had a lot of the authors for the Pisces book. By the way, there were several, wasn't just one thing,
Yes.
Matt. There were several that backed out or changed their minds or flaked out at the last minute.
Oh no.
And
Very, very
Yeah.
Pisces.
and a lot of people, and I will say there are other writers and other editors that were like, oh, the Pisces are doing it again. But but there was also, actually, all the whole series of 12, all 12 books were true to form. The process of creation matched the signs. But the Pisces that would but then one would leave or not finish something, and then suddenly one would jump out of nowhere and say, "Hey, I'm willing to do that, or I can do that, or I can fix that." So that's that fix it thing that Pisces have, and oftentimes we only look at it in terms, oh, Pisces can get, codependent with people and want to fix their problems, yada yada. No, that's not it. Pisces are simply trying to bring back together those things that have been sundered and severed within themselves and within other people or the culture.
I love
That's
that.
in, that's interesting because like I'm just thinking about myself and like when it comes to occult. See, this is what I mean about Evo, like all these like little epiphanies going off. But like I have this like I have a fixation on the idea of paradox and wholeness within paradox. And so
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
completely makes sense with
Hmm.
like what Evo's saying. Like I'm always looking at like yes, they can be contradictions, but like they can also both be true, and that may not make logical sense, but like it brings wholeness into the view. So
Yes.
that's,
Absolutely.
I guess, in very
Oh,
Pisces.
it's very Pisces, but I think also, I don't know if sometimes I sort of feel that we have so much access to information now, where
Hmm.
in the past, when we were, I have also a very deep fascination for owning card catalogs. Both of you will appreciate this
Yep.
because it was like my Google as a child. So when
My
we were
work stu-
younger,
my work study job in college was working in the card catalogs.
oh, I could still smell them.
Yep.
Um, when we were younger and we were researching something and we read something and maybe we got enough to cite their works and go into bibliographies. It depends on how far we took it, right? But at some point there would come where we thought we had the answer, and
Hmm.
that was the answer that we went with.
Right.
Whether it was right or wrong or proven or unproven, it was our answer. But now, with the information age and the internet and just the speed of information and the speed of technology for creating new information, we're constantly in this battle of knowing and unknowing things, or having other people's opinion or them adding their work and compounding it. So
Hmm.
I feel like we're constantly almost existing in paradox,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
what we try, our brains are trying to say, like, this is a pillar, this is a column, this is foundational for us, and then it's like we're constantly living in these crumbling and rebuilding moments. I, I think you have to be comfortable with that
Well,
a little bit.
I think, I mean, I am younger, obviously, so I don't have the experience of being around for like previous
Sure. rub
generations of the
it,
craft.
rub it in, rub it in.
But but I think like for me, one of the things that I think people naturally want to do is they want to make the craft a religion in the
Mm,
sense of like an exoteric religion,
right.
like the religions you can go and convert to, as opposed to like an esoteric religion or um, I mean, religion's a tricky word, but religion fits. But of like the mysteries, it's a mystery tradition. And I think with that comes a lot of like, this was true at one level or one time, but no longer is
Hmm.
as you progress. I also have noticed just in the years that I've been involved in the occult community is that things come in waves, and that includes
Mm,
opinions. So, and I also see like, for example, when I entered the craft, hexing, cursing, all of that was super taboo. And then it flipped into like, let's curse everyone. Like here is an Instagram post, like tutorial on cursing. And now I'm starting to see the tide finally like kind of back away from that. But it's not just cursing. That's just the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah.
And I think of like one of my teachers, Christopher Penzak. He talks about how this information age is the great blessing and the great curse, because it's a blessing because we have all this information and access to it, and it's a curse because we have all this information and access to it.
Agreed. Somebody had commented, because of these books, I can harness any of the signs so that I can get what I need done or accomplished. I
Yes.
absolutely agree and love that. And I for one, am also all for understanding other people,
Hmm.
because it allows us to give people grace. So in understanding Pisces more, where, as I said, I really didn't have a lot of foundation for Pisces in my life, it really does help me understand when I do come across people that are Pisces, or people that come into the shop and are looking for, hi, I'm a Pisces and I want to get started. Where should I go? And I feel like, well, here we go. Right? It's beautiful.
You can also
Yeah,
look
and one of the things I
on.
really love about this series is Ivo picked all of my favorite authors. Like every book is someone that I love and I love their work, even if they don't have a book. Like Thumper Forge doesn't have a book yet, but
Yeah.
he's like one of the only
About to.
Pathos blogs I read
Yes.
religiously.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed. Amazing.
I was just going to say, don't forget that each of the 12 signs is also a spirit.
Yes.
And
I
as a for example, I'm a Sag, which means if I and I plan I plan a lot of things, and I have called upon the spirit of Capricorn more than once for that purpose. Help me plan
Mhm.
this.
Yes, absolutely. I think there are some times too where like where Evo, you just said that each sign is a spirit.
Hmm.
And like there are some people that do lack, like you lack air, where you could call on the spirit of that
Yeah,
sign to help you. I love that. So my business partner, that means you could also call on the spirit of Capricorn and
this is
Earth,
true.
because she lacks Earth. I actually am her Earth.
I like both. Like I said, like Earth, my only sign is my moon, at
Mhm.
least until you get to outer planets, and then air. I don't believe I have anything until you get to the outer planets as well, like the asteroid belt and stuff
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah, it's amazing. She said, I have you. I love her. So you have no, oh, so I hear, so Pythian priestess says I have no fire in my chart. So now it's great. We could just
You could
call on the
absolutely call
energy.
fire.
Mm.
I love that.
Call upon the fire of look at if you have your chart done, see where Leo is, see where Sag is, see where Aries is. That's where fire lives within you, or at least the portal to the realm of fire that you can call from.
Yes. I love that. I think sometimes I like when we have agency. So now we could take
Hmm.
responsibility for ourselves instead of just using the I have no insert
Right.
the lack of. And then we just sort of like throw up our hands and say, well, I don't have it. So, you know, maybe it's very cap rising of me to say you have to take responsibility and figure it out. That sounds like something a cap rising would say, right? I think there's so much focus on the techniques in astrology. We often overlook that the zodiac is a
Yes,
map of internal
yes,
alchemy. Knowing those
yes.
energies means knowing yourself. Thank you, Scorpio 6X astrology. That's beautiful and poignant and
Mhm.
true, because I think we do forget sometimes, right? Absolutely. So the two of you are welcome to come to our shop at any time. If you don't know where that is, it's in Amityville, New York, home of the very famous
Yep,
house that I'm sure
yep,
you are aware
yep.
of. Um, we would love to have you. It's an open invitation um, for you guys whenever you're around. Matt, I know we're talking about some other things as
Yeah.
well. Evo, you're not so super far if you ever
No, no,
feel like coming to hang.
Mhm.
We would love to
yep.
have you.
I could do
Um,
that.
You guys, we have most of the witch series in stock. We actually need to do a reorder because I think some of them have sold out, but I know
Hmm.
for sure I saw Pisces, I saw Aquarius, I saw Libra. I feel like I saw one or two Capricorns. Um, Shoot us a DM if you're interested. Of course, you know, I'm sure Amazon and Barnes and Noble would take your money, but shop small because, you know, Jeff has enough cash.
Yes, it does.
Um, any last questions to anybody watching online with us before we close off for the night? I'd love to always be mindful of everybody's time. Um, give give another second if anybody has a
I think
last
there's
minute
another question.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was I really don't say, I have to read a lot. I have to read a lot of books. We buy a lot of books. We read a lot of books. And sometimes in reading books, you're like, I have to read this. This wasn't that. You know, this was so enjoyable, so
Hmm.
informative, just really beautiful. As I said, guys, don't just get your sign, get all 12. You're going to have so much insight into all the people in your life. You're both amazing. Thank you for joining us. I'm so glad I caught this. You guys are amazing. I agree. Um, and with that, you guys, thank you so much.
All
Really,
right.
really grateful for
Hey,
you
talk to
both
you again
joining me
soon.
tonight.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. All right, have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.